Look at the date on your phone. Whatever it says, it might be wrong. Not by a few minutes, by 297 years. In 1991, a German historian named Heribert Illig published a paper so outrageous it should have ended his career. His claim, the early Middle Ages, from 614 to 911 AD, never happened. 300 years of history, including an emperor named Charlemagne, were fabricated by three of the most powerful men in the medieval world. And the strangest part? There's a mathematical error baked into the calendar you use every day, one that nobody has fully explained. Not the Vatican, not historians, nobody. This is the phantom time hypothesis, and this is the investigation I couldn't stop thinking about. Here's the timeline everyone learns. Rome falls in 476. Europe slides into the Dark Ages. A few hundred years of chaos, plague, and lost knowledge. Then Charlemagne shows up, unites the Franks, and gets crowned Holy Roman Emperor on Christmas Day in the year 800. Slowly, civilization claws its way back, and eventually the Renaissance begins. It's clean. It fits on one page. You've seen it in every textbook, every History Channel documentary, every classroom timeline pinned to the wall above the whiteboard. But here's the thing about clean timelines. They're almost never true. History is messy, complicated, full of contradictions and lost documents and centuries where nobody was keeping reliable records. The fact that this story fits so neatly into a single paragraph should tell you something. Not that it's correct, that somebody edited it. And Heribert Illig was very, very suspicious about who did the editing. But before we get to his theory, we need to talk about a pope, a calendar, and 3 missing days that changed everything. Illig's investigation didn't start with kings or conspiracies. It started with math. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII decided to fix the calendar, the one Europe had been using. The Julian calendar, named after Julius Caesar, had a small problem. It drifted, about 1 day every 128 years, not enough to notice in a lifetime. But over centuries, the calendar slowly fell out of sync with the actual position of the sun. By the time Gregory got around to fixing it, Easter was landing on the wrong date. That was a problem the church couldn't ignore. So Gregory assembled a team of astronomers and mathematicians. They calculated the drift and concluded the calendar was off by 10 days. On October 4th, 1582, the Pope issued a decree. Tomorrow would be October 15th. 10 days, erased overnight. If you went to bed on a Thursday, you woke up a week and a half later. It's one of the strangest corrections in the history of measurement, but here's what Illig noticed, and this is the detail that launched the entire theory. The Julian calendar had been running since 45 BC. By 1582, that's over 1,600 years of accumulated drift. At 1 day per 128 years, the math says the error should have been about 13 days, not 10, 13. 3 days are missing. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, there must be a boring explanation for that, a rounding error, some medieval adjustment nobody wrote down. And you might be right, there are proposed explanations, but what I want you to sit with is this. That 3-day discrepancy existed for 400 years before anyone seriously questioned it. 3 unexplained days in the single most important measurement system humans have ever built, and the entire academic establishment just shrugged and moved on. Illig didn't shrug. He did what any obsessive researcher would do. He ran the numbers backward. 3 missing days of drift, at a rate of 1 day every 128 years, equals roughly 297 years of time that shouldn't exist. That's not a rounding error. That's an entire era, and it's the exact length of the early Middle Ages, the period with the thinnest historical record in all of European civilization. That's either a coincidence, or it's something else entirely. So Illig built a theory. He called it the phantom time hypothesis. And honestly, it's one of the most audacious claims I've ever investigated. The argument goes like this. 3 rulers, Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, Pope Sylvester II, and Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII, conspired to fabricate 297 years of European history. They forged documents, they backdated charters, they created entire genealogies for kings and popes who never existed, and the most explosive claim, they may have invented Charlemagne. Let that land for a second. Charlemagne, the father of the Holy Roman Empire, the man on the old German coins, the subject of centuries of paintings and epic poetry, one of the most famous rulers in Western civilization. According to Illig, he might be a fictional character, invented by 3 men who needed a legendary ancestor to justify their own power. But why go through all that trouble? Why fabricate 300 years? The answer is the year 1000. In medieval Christian theology, Round millennial dates carried immense prophetic weight. The turn of the first millennium was supposed to mark a great age of Christian rule. Otto III wanted to be the emperor at the center of that moment, but he had a problem. He was actually living around the year 700, so according to Illig, they did something remarkably simple. They moved the calendar forward, padded it with 3 centuries of invented history, created a legendary emperor to fill the gap, and positioned themselves right at the year 1000, exactly where prophecy said a great ruler should stand. Now, you might expect this is where the theory falls apart, where some obvious piece of evidence makes the whole thing ridiculous. But here's what makes the phantom time hypothesis genuinely unsettling. The archaeological record for the early Middle Ages in Western Europe is thin, suspiciously thin. Illig pointed to real problems. There are almost no original documents from the 7th, 8th, and 9th centuries. What we have are copies, made centuries later by monks whose accuracy we have no way to verify. The Aachen Chapel, supposedly built under Charlemagne's orders, contains architectural techniques that historians say didn't exist until much later. Byzantine coins from this period show suspicious gaps. Construction methods don't match. Artistic styles jump in ways that are hard to explain. He wasn't just ranting on the internet. He was a credentialed researcher pointing at real holes in the historical record. And when professional historians tried to respond, what happened next surprised everyone, including Illig. They did prove him wrong, eventually, but it took years of dedicated cross-disciplinary scientific work to do it, and the tools they needed didn't come from European history books. The first serious rebuttal came from Dendrochronology, which is basically the CSI version of botany. You know how they carbon date ruins in archaeology documentaries? This is more precise than that. Scientists take timber beams from ancient buildings and count the rings, year by year, matching growth patterns against a master database going back thousands of years. It's like reading a barcode stamped by nature, and the tree rings confirm without any gaps that the 7th, 8th, and 9th centuries did happen, every year accounted for. The wood doesn't lie. The second rebuttal came from Islamic astronomical records. While Europe was supposedly forging its history, scholars in Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba were meticulously documenting eclipses, comet sightings, and planetary positions. These records match modern astronomical calculations perfectly. You can't fake where Jupiter was in 743 AD. The math doesn't allow it. The stars are the universe's receipt, and they weren't in on the conspiracy. And the third, which Illig never adequately addressed, is that the rest of the planet kept right on going during these supposedly phantom centuries. China was in its Tang Dynasty golden age. The Islamic world was inventing algebra, optics, and modern medicine. The Maya were building Chichen Itza, 3 civilizations on 3 continents, with independent record-keeping systems, all confirming that these centuries were real. Are we supposed to believe that 3 European rulers forged their local history while the entire rest of the world carried on normally? The theory collapses the moment you zoom out past the borders of medieval Christendom, so the phantom time hypothesis is almost certainly wrong. But, and this is what actually matters, think about what it took to prove it. Not a textbook. Not everyone knows Charlemagne was real. Not a Wikipedia article. It took tree rings from ancient German oak beams, star charts from Islamic astronomers 1,000 years dead, cross-referencing with civilizations that most Europeans in the year 1582 had never heard of. That's the real revelation. Not that 3 centuries were fake, but that our certainty about the past turned out to rest on much thinner evidence than anyone wanted to admit. The chain of trust stretching back through history is real, but there are links in that chain that are weaker than they look, and it took a German historian with a wild theory to force us to actually check. We live in an era where a teenager with a laptop can generate a photograph of a historical event that never happened, where deepfakes put words in a president's mouth, where the word misinformation shows up in every news cycle, and nobody agrees on what it means anymore. We're told constantly to verify, fact-check, be skeptical, but here's the part nobody says out loud. Our confidence in the past relies on surprisingly thin evidence. We trust the timeline of history the same way we trust that the floor is solid. We never think to question it because it's always been there. Illig questioned it, and what he found wasn't a conspiracy. It was something more uncomfortable, a system of historical knowledge built on consensus, not proof. Historians believed the early Middle Ages happened because other historians believed it. The chain of trust went back centuries, but the physical evidence at the base of that chain was thinner than anyone had bothered to check. Now multiply that by every claim you accept without checking, every date in a textbook, every established fact that got established by repetition instead of verification. If 3 medieval rulers could have, theoretically, fabricated 3 centuries of history, And it took modern tree science and Islamic star charts to prove they didn't. What does that say about everything that happened before the printing press? Before photography? Before anyone alive today was born? The phantom time hypothesis isn't dangerous because it might be true. It's dangerous because it reveals how few of us ever bother to ask, how do we actually know what we know? The date on your phone is probably correct, probably, but the fact that one historian with a calculator could force the entire field of medieval studies to defend itself, using tree rings, star charts, and records from civilizations most Europeans couldn't have found on a map, that should tell you something. Not about the calendar, about certainty, about the distance between what we know and what we assume we know. 297 years, that's how much history was on trial. And the verdict wasn't obviously real. The verdict was confirmed. But only after we checked. Nobody had checked before. If this changed how you think about the history you were taught, subscribe. Next week, I'm investigating another thing everyone accepts without question, and the answer is stranger than the theory.